Okay. All right. We are recording. Hi, Megan. We are waiting for Jason. Oh, Jason's here. So we just need to make him a presenter. There we go. Hi, Jason.
Hello.
All right, we are going to get started since everybody's here. So, hi everyone. I am Kaya Walton, and I am your host for today's Adobe Analytics Champion Office Hours. I am joined by some of my amazing champion colleagues, and I'll let them introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Megan. Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Megan Powers. I am a second year Adobe champion. I like to take part in these. I hear really great questions from you all. I am a senior manager at CarMax, the nation's used uh, leader in used car retail and a Fortune 500 company, best 100 companies to work for the past 20 years. Really great place to work. And yeah, happy to be here. Happy to take any questions.
All right, Arun.
Hey, hi. I'm Pradeep Arunraj. You can call me Arun, and I work as an enterprise architect at Nextdoor Digital. Right now in India, I have 11 plus years of experience in MIS analytics and personalization. Currently into the customer data platform. Yeah, my role most of the time it is focused on planning and onboarding tech solution for businesses, primarily Adobe Analytics. That brings me here. Forward to take the questions from you all. Thank you.
Last but not least, Jason.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Egan. I'm an analytics architect at Further, formerly known as Search Discovery, if people don't know that. But I've been here as a consultant for the last almost 11 years and have been working with Adobe technology for 15 to 20 years, somewhere along those lines. I've helped write the CJA developer exam recently, Adobe Analytics and other exams with Adobe. So look forward to sharing as much knowledge as I can and answering as many questions as I can contribute to.
Great. And as I mentioned, I'm Kaya Walton. I am the Director of Analytics at Voice of America. We're a federal agency and also a news broadcasting agency. So we're kind of a weird anomaly. So a couple of household items before we jump in. This recording, we're currently recording right now. You can find a recording of this office hours on the Adobe Analytics user group YouTube channel. Mandy has been great to share that on chat. And also, we have some pre submitted questions that we'll tackle first, but go ahead and post your questions in the chat, and I will drop those in the conversation as we go along. So, first question. Can you talk about the segment builder, particularly about time sequence and time within in which containers to use? Megan, I think you have this.
Sorry, couldn't get off mute. Um, yeah, so I tried to just put some general best practices, some things I do with segments and time sequences. If some of this doesn't answer your question, feel free to put it in the chat. Although my chat is just a spinning wheel right now, so I can't actually see. So if anything's directed at me, let me know. But yeah, so sequential segments are really great and can be used in a variety of ways. One way to shortcut to create sequential segments is to you can right click from like a fallout or flow report and choose create segment, and that'll create it for you, set up that structure for you, take some of the work out of it. You can do sequential segments with hits, visits, or visitor levels. Some other kind of general best practices tips, I think of containers like the parentheses that determine the order of operations. I like to use them, especially if I want to put an and an or in the same segment, like put all, container 1 has and, container 2 has or. I think of the after blank time setting as the minimum point in which to start that segment. and the within blank time as the maximum point in which to end that segment, if that's helpful. So yeah, just some kind of general things. Happy to answer something more specific if there is in there. And then I think there's some other folks who had answers as well.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Yeah, so let me share some of the inputs related to sequential segments. So this is one of the most asked question, right? Whenever we go to Adobe community, I can see that sequential segment is something, right? Most of the people would always ask for, right? We have discussed this sequential segmentation multiple times, but still, how it works and if at all we understand the use cases of sequential segmentation, particularly when it comes to uh, only before and only after sequence, right? It is nothing but after and before, right? So if you try to use those elements or conditions, it is really powerful. So some of the use cases which I would say is, or which I am remember right now is, calculate how many times something has happened before some time, right? So that is one of the generic question people usually ask. How many product details pages have been viewed before a visitor first contact a seller, right? Or multiple times there is a question related to, I need to understand number of page views or number of pages visited between two events, right? Or two particular pages or two particular events, right? So those cases, how effectively we are using only before and only after sequence, right? It is going to be really helpful. I have almost used many tougher complex cases, right? The sequential segmentation, and it was really fruitful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of the links to you in the chat, right? Where whatever the use cases which I have talked, you can also go through that. One is from our analytics champion, analytics Audrey Salerno, who has written one of the use case, and another one is something which I have written it in a separate blog. I'm sharing both the URLs in the link. Whenever you have time, take a look into it. This can granularly give you everything related to sequential segments, starting from how do you want to use it and how powerful, if at all, we want to use it before and after sequence. Both should be there, right? Both should be there in the links which I'm going to share. Please use it whenever, if you want to, right? So that's my input.
Somebody asked, would you be able to show examples or screen share building out the projects? Just asking if you mean the an example of the segments.
uh, yeah, I have just shared a PDF to them in the link, right, which has each and every step, right? So that's it. Using sequential segment, it is a little bit complex, but we have one more question which is on our way, where I have used a sequential segment. So during the time, I can show the segment builder to you to see, right, how sequential segment can be benefited out of it. We can share it, but still, this PDF from Audrey is one of the old PDF, but there, this is where, right, I started understanding segmentation in a better way. Before that, even I guess before 5 to 6 years, might be sequential segmentation was really newer, but right now, since because we have a lot of experience with it, we can play around it. I'm sharing one more link as well, right? And this is also one more use case where we can use sequential segment for it. So I have shared both the links in the chat.
Okay, since you mentioned the next question and an example of a sequential segment, let's jump right in. How to create a segment that tracks visitors who visit X or more product detail pages, either the same product or different, and either the same session or returns. So, Megan, let's start with you and then we'll pass it to Arun.
Yeah. So there's a few different ways, and there's probably more even than this, so other folks can jump in. But if you can use a visitor-based segment if you want it, if you don't care whether it's in the same session or returning. If you only wanted it in the same session, use a based segment. But if you want to make sure you include return visits, use visitor. I built out a couple different examples, which I can show here. Let's see. Okay, so in V1 here, and really depends on how you're tagging and how your site is set up. But if you have a product detail page, one thing you can do is use the product view metric. So I set that up. There's a visitor-based segment where product view is greater than or equal to 1. So they have viewed one or more product pages across the same visit or return visits. So that's one way you could do it. A second way is if you have a product detail page and has a page name, you can do a segment where, again, visitor based, where the page, like in this data set, for example, I typed in product details and I saw all these things like product details : and then the different SKUs. This is my data set, so I'm not super familiar with it, but so like I created a segment where page starts with product details, which would pull in all of these. So again, this is a visitor-based segment, so this is going to pull in any current or returning session anytime that visitor has viewed a page that starts with product details. So those are a couple ways to do it. Again, your site may have lots of other additional tagging. If you have capture a product variable or SKU, you can use that. However is most intuitive for your site. So I'll stop sharing now. But those are a couple things that came to my mind first.
Right, Arun?
Yeah, let me quickly share my screen. I'm just zooming in so that it is visible for people. Yeah. When you say X number of pages, right? So how many times a particular page has been viewed, irrespective of the events, right? So let's say if we have a segmentation which has page view is greater than 2, then it is not just about how many times a page has been or particular page has been viewed, right? Example, we can have a segmentation which is more than 3 page views. It might be one page, it might be multiple pages, right? Sometimes if you try to create a combination of segments saying that product page equal to page A or something, and then put a page views greater than 3, right? Again, this is going to match the condition saying that a visitor or visit which has 3 page views and this particular page didn't again mean that it is viewed 3 times or it is viewed exactly 2 times or more than 2 times, right? So segmenting that X number of time a page view is pages viewed, right? It is not straightforward if you ask me. Rather, it is a way, right? Here is where, right? The sequential segment is really powerful. So I have created a simple segment to show you a product page here. The use case which I have taken is product page 1036, right? An example. So if at all I want to understand whether a visitor or within a visit, this particular product page has been viewed 2 times. It has to be viewed 2 times, right? Exactly 2 times or more than 2 times, right? Here in this case, more than 2 times. Then we can put a sequential segment saying that, so there is a visitor who visits this page and then he need to visit the same page once again, which means it is ideally going to include all the visitor who has at least visited this particular page twice, right? That is the answer, right? More than X number of time, right? But sometimes we also need to understand, I want to understand exactly 2 times the page has been viewed within a visit, right? So if at all we need to create visitor segment for it, then what we can do is same sequential segment. We can say that, hey, page this has to be visited and then the same page has to be visited. But if it is goes more than thrice, right, then I need to exclude it. So I can create a simple uncondition and exclude everything where it has been viewed thrice, which means it is exactly twice, not only once, it is exactly twice. Whenever any particular visitor visit this page twice but not thrice, then the visitor would be included to the segmentation, right? So in this way we can try to, what I would say, right, constrict all the containers. But if you directly ask me whether it's an easy way, definitely not. That is some way of workaround we need to do like this to understand how many times a pages is viewed X number of time or more than X number of times. And this will also work for a page name, right? So one particular specific page or product, it will be really helpful. Let's say I want to understand multiple product pages. Then rather than going for product page or page name, we need to go for a subcategory or category or site sections. So we would have a common identifier or dimensional value that can be captured across multiple different products or same products, right? So if we do that, then we can also apply the same logic. And this way, this is one of the use case again, right, where sequential segment is really powerful. So that's my take.
Yeah, and going back to that first question of sequential segments,
Yes.
if you wouldn't mind sharing those again, some of these are sequential segments. So if would you mind opening up your segment builder
Yeah,
there?
I'm just
Yeah, so so this one isn't a sequential segment, but it is a good view of a use case where you'd want to use the different containers. So see how, or sorry, there's a sequential segment within a segment, right? So you have page equals this and this, and page equals this and then this and then this. So you want to use those different containers so you can have an and a then in the same segment. Without the containers, it stays with one. It stays with and, or it stays with or it stays with then. Create the containers help you be able to use both
exactly. Yeah.
systems. Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind opening up the then that little clock next to it, since folks asked the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
here's where you pick the after or within. So if you pick after, you're saying like this is the minimum point at which it starts. If you pick within, you're saying this is the maximum point. There's lots of options in there for you to choose from after 1 day, 1 hour, or 1 hit, or 1 page view, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yep.
even these three options would be really cooler for you. So here, this condition is including everyone. Sometimes you want to understand what has happened before and what has happened after, right? So after sequence and before sequence. So we can mix match everything and we can play around so that we can get the containers, right, which is considered towards our use case. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for your input.
Yep. And
All
I'm
right.
sorry, guys, I still can't see the chat. It's still swirling for me. So if there's anything that comes up, feel free to, I don't know, send it to me some other way, email it or something.
I have also copy pasted the experience league discussion where we have discussed about this particular topic a while ago. So one of the screenshot which I shared there might be before 3 years or 2 years, right? It might be an outdated one, but still the context of the discussion is still valid, and you can take a look into it and see, right, how sequential segment can be really helpful for you.
All right. So next question, how to import Google Ads data into Adobe CGA? Jason?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at an initial crack at this, and I think Arun had some comments on this as well. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see if I share the correct one here. Sorry, I've not shared with this one before. We'll see. Okay, yeah, there you go. You can see it. Yeah. First off, I just want to point out that there's a connector for this, but number one, the most important thing to know is that it is temporarily unavailable. So while I'm about to tell you how to do it, theoretically, you can't actually do it. So just keep that in mind. But basically, the inexperienced platform, if you go over here on the left-hand side to connections, sources, and just do a search for Google, you will see the Google Ads. And I guess, it says here it's in beta, so that's probably a tip-off as to why maybe it's or non-functional at the moment anyway. But you can set it up here and you enter all this normal account information and then go through this flow. However, I will say that it's not necessarily quite that easy. There are some additional steps that you have to also configure and get in place. I'm just trying to review my notes here. You have to have something called ID sync also configured. This is something that requires Adobe customer care involvement to configure this ID sync. So it's not necessarily, like I said, super straight. And I think, Arun, you had some additional questions like, like there's a lot of other dependencies in here. Like, what are you trying to necessarily do, with the connector, with the data, right? And I'll drop the documentation for this. It's pretty well documented, but it's not super push the buttons and you're ready to go either necessarily. But there is at least some kind of connector for it when it does start working again. So.
Exactly, yes. I will just go with Jason and how do we need to connect with the source, but I will also give you some additional tips here, right? So when you say CGA, we already know that CGA is an application built on top of AEP, right? Which means ideally we need to push all these data to AEP data lake, right? From there, CGA can consume and CGA can give you a reporting, right? Nice reporting. So source connector and how to set up the source connector, I guess Jason would share the details with you. You can take it. But two things which I want to discuss when you are adding a third party data, right? Any third party data as a source connector is which data you want to see it in CJA, right? Many times, whatever I can see, right? I'm not completely from a digital advertising background, but still, right? Many times, what I can see is these source connectors is not pushing any of the customer related data. Rather, most of the time, it is campaign related data, right? So, if at all we need to understand campaign fallout like impression, click-throughs and conversion, it is one of the good use case where you can import all the impressions and then the clicks and everything, and using a matching key which is like campaign ID, we can understand the end-to-end flow, right? So that is a simple use case. But if at all we think that we need to put a use case around the customer journey or visitor journey, I'm not pretty sure, right? It is going to be a little bit tougher for sure. And if you set up anything with the destination, as said by Jason, ID sync is essential. Yeah, because you know the regular AAM, how AAM work, right? Audience manager work. You need to make sure that the sync is proper so that it can be matched properly at the third party end, right? So that sync is very much needed. If we don't have the sync, then unfortunately we need to rely on the first party identifier. You need to have some sort of identifier like email address or phone number, anything, so that there can be a match. If at all we want to target a visitors, then the sync is mandatory, and you need to set up few things with customer care, enable the container, add the container to your implementation, right? So there are some workarounds you need to do. But in short, as a source, bringing the third party data is simple, but what is the level of data that it can bring in, and what are the use cases we need to solve is something we need to think through and we need to work upon.
All right. Next question. Why am I seeing multiple server calls on a single screen in my mobile app?
Yeah. Let's see. Would you like me to share my screen? Okay. So, I mean, truly, there's perhaps an unlimited number of reasons this could be happening, but some common things I could think of, and I saw Arun listed some as well. You could have an asynchronous call happening where something is loading after the initial page load, like that even can happen on a .com domain, right? Where, like, if you want to capture the page state of something, you have your regular page load call, and then you have a secondary call immediately after that. Like if you're passing something through an API that doesn't get there in time for the page load, that could happen. You can also um, I'll come back to the foreground background thing, but is it a target like decisioning call? Could it be a click event versus your page load event? Like if there's some click event getting triggered right away. And then more specifically to mobile apps, if a customer is offline, some of the calls may come in later. So Adobe still captures it, but if it's offline, it's not going to send it right away. We've seen that happen sometimes where, a customer will click on something and we'll send an event, but nothing happens right away. We'll get it later, and sometimes it'll look like duplicate things are happening, even though they're not. And then the foreground background hit is unique to mobile. You have the ability to break those down in Analysis Workspace if you want to try to diagnose. Maybe they're all like background hits, like the app is loading in the background and it's getting hit. That's a pretty common mobile thing. Or, are there any duplicate calls, like by accident? Are you capturing the exact same value? This is a good troubleshooting step. Like, look at what's in the calls. Is it all the exact same stuff in the call, or is there separate information being passed in one versus the other? If it's all the exact same, probably just firing duplicate somehow. But if it's two separate, even if there's one little variable that's different, something different is triggering that rule to happen. So again, not totally sure why without going deep into your specific use case, but those are some of the common troubleshooting steps I would take to try to diagnose the issue. So I'll stop sharing now.
All right, Arun.
Yeah, I will go with Megan on this, right? So first important thing we need to understand is whether it's a duplicate hit. If it is a duplicate hit, we need to go and fix it. It is something firing wrongly, right? So that is something need to be fixed, or else we also need to understand whether the offline calls are firing. Let's say sometimes if the mobile application is offline, and then if at all the cell is trying to engage in your mobile application, those might be queued, right? Those server call might be queued, and that can be sent whenever the customer is back and online, right? So we need to understand whether it's a offline queued calls or else it's a duplication. If both are not there, that every call is different, then we need to understand the code base here. Unlike a page, what mobile application would have is mobile application screen might have multiple modules in the same screen. Let's say if you take a banking sector, right, the usual one which I'm using it right now, I can see that at the top there will be account summary activity. In the right hand side there is a transaction activity. Below there is a menu activity, right? So there will be three modules sitting in the same screen. And our code developers, most of the time mobile development happen in such a way that every module is tagged properly or tagged separately, so that if at all we interact with that particular module, there is a server call which is triggered and data collection is done. Sometimes when this cumulative of modules when the same screen is loading, there might be an option, right, where every particular module would trigger a server call, right? It can happen, and I have seen over the period of my experience, right, that it has been happened. So we need to understand how the code base is written, and then if it is firing a separate calls for every modules, we need to go and arrest this based on the screen. Only on the separate modules we should have a server call, and the rest of the cumulative modules, rather than triggering each and every time, we should arrest it, or we should constrict our server call in such a way that it is not duplicating or sending more number of server calls, right? So that's what we need to validate. So validation is the key here, right? These are the three possible options which can lead to multiple server calls.
All right. Question for the panel. I think everybody has an answer for this. Why do I see unspecified value using a specific EVAR when using visit as a metric? Yeah. Megan, we'll start with you.
Oh yes, the age-old question, right? So I always think of unspecified as as not its own value, but as the lack of a value for that variable for whatever metric you're looking at. For example, let's say you have an EVAR for internal search terms, and you pull that EVAR into a table with visits as the metric. If you see unspecified in that list, it's going to represent any visit, because that's your metric, where a customer did not enter an internal search term and no value was captured for that EVAR. If your metric instead of visits was like a product purchase or a lead submitted, similar thing. If you had like your internal search term EVAR and you pulled that in with a lead submit metric or a product purchase metric, unspecified would represent any product purchase event or lead submit event where a customer didn't enter an internal search term, and so no value was captured for that EVAR, and they did it anyway. I can share my screen quickly and is show, just for anyone who's unfamiliar with it, you can, so like if you, let me find, I should have done this before, so we'll see if this turns out. So you see unspecified here. This is just the number of occurrences of all the occurrences that happen on your site where search keyword didn't exist. So if we change this to visits, again, this is going to be the number of visits that happen on your site, and unspecified is the number of visits without a search keyword, because you can still visit without searching, right? You can hide this if you want by clicking on this filter and checking that checkbox. So once you apply that, unspecified will go away. Sometimes it's helpful to have there, sometimes not. The reason it can be helpful is because that can very quickly give you the not metric for whatever metric you're looking at. So otherwise you'd have to add up all these and then subtract from the total to get how many times that didn't happen in any, as your totals. So unspecified can very quickly give you the subtraction amount, but sometimes it can be distracting, so you do have that option to hide it. And you can see how your totals adjust with and without it. So there's some ideas that I had.
Jason?
Yeah, just to add to what Megan said, and apologies, I had to step away for a minute, so I hope I'm not repeating anything you said, Megan. But just regarding unspecified, I'll say, I've been doing this for 15 to 20 years. I have unspecified and none come up all the time, and I'm sure for the next however long I continue doing what I'm doing, someone's going to ask about unspecified and none. Like, it's just a never-ending question, and it's never a fun one to try and explain, but just something I like to keep in mind in general is that, again, sorry if this was already said, but visits is not a deduplicated value or metric, essentially, kind of like orders. So in terms of like something like an internal search, if you hit a home page and you land, obviously you didn't conduct a search. At that moment, that is a visit where there was no search. So that's none, essentially. And then if you conduct a search from the homepage and land on a subsequent page, that is a visit with a search. And in that case, it's one visit with a search, one visit without a search, but 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 = 1 in that case, right? It's one actually truly unique session or visitor, but it's 1 + 1 = 1 in that case. So, keep that in mind whenever you look at, the total at the top when it says, 5,000, but all of the individual numbers add up to 7,000, right? That, you can't add those numbers up because they don't duplicate. In a ranked report, you'll find the same thing if you run a report for orders with products, right? Because one order might contain 2 products, so that's 1 + 1 = 1 because those 2 products were in one order. Kind of the same concept, but in the case of the search, you're going to have a none or an unspecified because on your homepage there was no search. That was pretty much the only thing that I had to add to that.
Arun, anything to add?
Okay. So first thing is you would be seeing unspecified, not only the times that you would see visit as a metric, but also page views and also unique visitors, right? Other than the instances, whenever you try to get any EVAs, right? Usually this is only available for EVA, right? I will stick with what Megan says, right? It is a lack of variable, but why it is not appearing for a prop, but it is appearing for an EVA is, as said by Jason, it is because of the persistence, right? So EVAR is a persistent variable, which means you need to persist through a time period, which can be a visit, which can be a visitor or anything. So that particular variable value is common for the entire session, unlike in prop. So in prop, lack of variable is nothing but you won't see the value at all. But in EVAR, you would capture it as an unspecified because till the time the value is populated for that particular session, the value is empty. So empty value is nothing but unspecified. Nothing was there, nothing is specified there. That is unspecified for an EVAR. And if you see this in classifications, let's say you have a classification key, and if you see unspecified value, which means you didn't upload a proper data which can be qualified and classified with your key, right? So those are some of the areas, right, where unspecified can be seen when you use a metric. Already, since because already covered by Megan and Jason, right? It is just about additional points just I want to take.
Yeah, and those are all really great additional points. I'll add, like, sometimes, you may fire an EVAR either purposely or unpurposely with the value of none or null or undefined or something like that, right? If you want to capture that way, or maybe it's an error and it's capturing that way, that is different than unspecified. Those, even if it's not intentional, those will appear to Adobe as actual values of that EVAR, whereas unspecified is not a value of that EVAR. That can trip people up when they're creating segments, because I can share my screen again. We had this happen recently, so it's on my mind. But like, if you are creating a segment, let's say you have an EVAR that has, like your internal search term EVAR, like we were talking about, that has a bunch of the values, the correct values of internal search terms, but then somewhere there's a mistake and it's firing null, the word null, and then there's also the regular unspecified way in there. If you try to pull in a segment where you have search keyword exists, and you have something like null or undefined, like those words in there, that's going to be included in this segment, because Adobe doesn't know the difference right off the bat between a regular value like men's shoes versus null or undefined. So this by itself won't pull any unspecified values in, because that is, again, not a value. It doesn't exist for that segment. So that's a slightly more advanced topic, I guess, but something that could trip people up if you get into that situation, because unspecified does not mean the same thing as similar words like null or undefined. Sorry if I unnecessarily confuse people, but that can happen sometimes. So.
All right. Question from the chat. Can we repurpose the next page visited segment that gets generated by Adobe from the next or previous item panel to be updated and applied to any other page in the freeform table instead of using the next or previous item panel every single time?
I want to say yes, but so, like, if you're talking about a next page report or a previous page report, and you want to use that and they want to use that in a segment.
I think they want to repurpose the segment and apply it to other pages in that freeform table, instead of having to use the next or previous panel every time.
I would think so, unless it's specifically derived from a certain page to begin with. Like if you say next page from homepage or previous page to search, and then you try to apply that to other pages or dimensions in the same table, that might get a little wonky. But if it's a general next or previous page, then it should apply to the dimensions in a table. Let me know if I'm not, you guys, if I'm not thinking about that right. But
Yeah, what I have done is I just try to. I'm not using workspace for recent time, so I just try to create a simple next item panel. Let me quickly share my screen. I don't know whether it has answered the question, but let me quickly share the screen. And what I have done is, okay, sharing it. What I have done is I just went into this particular panel, just pulled in the panel here, and then I have selected some dimension here. Let's say page, and then I'm just putting something here, right? Let's say home, right? I'm just building it. So this is a simple panel which has multiple visualization. But even though if all these visualizations are created, what I can see is it is applied over the segment which is created during the click of apply, right? So this segment is already there here. So what you need to do is you need to just click on this particular segment, make this segment available for all your projects. If you do it, need not to be the case that you need to go into this panel once again to view your reports, right? Rather you can use the segmentation across your projects. I don't know whether this is a question, but I can see that the segment can be used outside the panel as well, right? Outside the next page panel as well. Should be feasible. Okay.
Okay. Another question from the chat. How can we capture relevant search and irrelevant search? Should we capture that in a different EVAR or prop?
Yeah, I guess my question there was I'm not really sure what irrelevant search is necessarily and what the usage
like
between the two are, right?
like a search that doesn't lead directly to that product being purchased, maybe.
Yeah, or null search. Is that an irrelevant search? Yeah, I'm just not really sure, right? Either way, I would track them in both in the same variable, probably, most likely.
Yeah,
I don't really
I
know
would
that
too.
why you would track it in two necessarily.
Same, because you don't know at the time of capture whether it's relevant or irrelevant, I think. Right. Yeah, I think I would track them all in the same.
True. Yeah,
EVAR.
and if it is null search or something like that, you're probably going to have a custom event that's just
You're right.
searches and null searches anyway. Well, because you'll probably have like number of search results in an event or variable as well. So
Yeah, I would agree. I think I'd track all of the search terms, however they're used, in the same variable, and then use other events to indicate how relevant it is or not. Like we have an event that fires with our search results, EVAR that says whether 0 search results were returned. We have a prop that tells us the number of search results that were returned. So, so that could help determine the relevancy of it.
Same here, I guess. So yeah, search keyword search, right? The search keyword is same EVA, but let's say if it returned any results, I would put it in some event, let's say event one. And if it didn't yield any results, I would put it in event two, so that I can directly go to the keywords and see which keyword is not having any results. So those keywords are irrelevant, right? Ideally. So that's how we can simply understand what is relevant and irrelevant. But if you want to group it, I don't know whether it is really important to group it from the classification point. I don't think so. It is just about what is the results. If there is no results, then it is irrelevant. If it is a result, right, then there is a relevancy. So just one EVAR with two different events would make sense. I'll just go with Megan and Jason here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another case that we've done here is create a segment where they did a search. It had search results, but they didn't like the search results, so they tried to redefine the search term, because then that could also be a sign that they might not be seeing the content that they're looking for. So that's also another way to go about it, is creating that segment and looking at those search terms that require some tweaking.
Yeah, and you could path search terms, right? If and see which ones they go to in order. especially if it's in a prop, that's easy to path. Like, are they just typing in different spellings of the same thing, or very similar things? Or are they going, like in our case at CarMax, like are they going totally different, like from trucks to sedans to blue trucks, or are they just mistyping Chevrolet a bunch of times or something like that?
Jen Kuntz added, would this maybe make sense as a classification of search terms?
I think that's one way to go about it too.
That was one of my thoughts too. Actually, like if you were going to try and like classify something like sentiment, right, based on your determination of those words and do an upload for that. Yeah. But yeah, very arbitrary, I suppose, and what you deem as irrelevant, right? So yeah.
I remember that we have done this particular grouping for one of our banking site where we have classified it based on not relevancy, but based on branded and unbranded. Anything that has the brand name in it, right? Let's say we are testing for Access Bank, right? Access or Access Bank, Access Rewards, and everything will go under branded. Anything which didn't have a keyword access, let's say generically credit card or bank or anything, will go for unbranded. So that type of grouping was also possible with some sort of like it can be either uploader or else it can be a classification rule builder. We can group it, but relevancy, I'm not pretty sure. We might be getting uh, multiple keywords, so it has to be manual. So sometimes we need to think through that.
A lot of people have jumped into this question, but I wanted to post it to the panel. The difference between dimension, page name, and URL. I think the problem here is that when the person asking is trying to align page name and URLs, they're getting different numbers. So I think Jason has added some thoughts to that.
Yeah, I think Mandy's in there commenting on it as well. It's just first off, I guess my comment in there is a silly thing. Jen Coons also noted this too, that URL for some reason is not available in Adobe Analytics. You have to capture it in a prop or an EVAR. So it's being captured in a prop and EVAR or EVAR in this case with page name. So, but I guess theoretically, homepage.com and the page name home aren't the same number in reporting. So it tells me that one way or the other, there's either the URL is getting multiple page names, or the page name's getting two URLs somewhere. Something else is also calling it home page, something like that. My recommendation was to do a data warehouse export and export your page name, the URL you're capturing, and then the actual URL, which is available in data warehouse report or request, and look at that and just comb through it for those few pages and see if, are they setting multiple URLs, or are vice versa, are multiple URLs sitting, the same URL sitting multiple page views, right? And that's probably the best way to hunt that down, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It could be happening, like, if you have a page that gets generated with a bunch of query string parameters, the page name could stay the same, but the URL could be changing every time that happens. Either, internal query parameters or external. That's a very common thing, or like spa pages. Similar thing could happen where maybe the URL is changing with the query params, but the page name is staying the same. I like the data warehouse recommendation from Jason. Another thing we do is capture. We capture in like 3 different props, or like a classification: the whole URL, the URL pre-query strings, and then just the query strings in separate props, so that we can troubleshoot stuff like that. So.
All right. Potentially the last question. Would you recommend a calculated metric or setting up processing rules if you need to summarize data using part of a page name? For example, if the site is split into sections that are consistently, oh no, it moved. For example, if the site is split into sections that are consistently the third section of the page name.
Mandy noted in there in the
Okay.
comments the recommendation. I think and I agree. The classification of rule builder. Like if it's consistently the third part of a string, you can write a regular expression that just
Same.
will parse that string and pull out the same thing. Like we have clients that will concatenate all of the UTM parameters into one big string, for example, and you can then use the classification rule builder to consistently pull the third piece out because it's always UTM medium and stick it in its own classification. Kind of the same idea, and you can do that with your pages as well.
That's what I recommend too. Classification rule builder.
Thank you.
Last question. Another question. Could anyone also update me about the Adobe Analytics Mentorship Program 2024? I haven't heard anything yet. The people to ask would be the folks on Experience League. I believe they might have the answers to that. So that could be a Experience League question.
Yeah, I just saw an email about that they are working on it and expect to have those assignments soon and to be on the lookout. But that's all I know.
Since nobody has asked a question yet, this is a good segue. If you have any questions, because this always happens to me too, after this office hour, you can always post those questions on Experience League. We are there. A bunch of our other fellow champions are there to answer any questions. And so I'm going to put that link into the chat. And so just post your questions there. Any other questions? While we're waiting for folks, also on August 7th, the Skills Exchange for Adobe Analytics is happening. A few of the other champions will be speaking and talking about all things Adobe Analytics. I am also going to share that link on the chat. If you want to register and join us, I believe it is 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time. So I think we've covered all of the questions. So again, a recording of this office hour will be available on the Adobe Analytics User Group YouTube channel. If you have any questions, go to Experience League, join us in the Skills Exchange. Other than that, I want to thank my fellow champions for joining us for this office hours. It's always great to learn from them. And with that, we bid you goodbye. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks, Thank you.